every change is a loss. It is a loss of the status quo. And that's the reason why many employees resist it, where even leaders, founders, company owners resist it. I've been involved in many change management operations, from messy nonprofits to tech startups to unicorn scale-ups, anything in between that you could imagine, turning sales organizations around, helping companies get acquired. And every single time, the company needs to grow out of its current status quo and reach the next level of operational maturity most of the time. But in some cases, you also need to go different rounds. And in order to reach that next level, you have to go through a lot of discomfort. There are people who are used to doing things a certain way. Some people build their careers around doing things a certain way. Some people plan their next 15 years across these same dynamics. Now, if you come in and you drive change, you don't have to come in. It could be an internal leader who drives change. And you drive change, you will face resistance. Not because people are not committed to the success of the company or its next level, but because people have something to lose. And if there's something that biologically, psychologically bugs us the most, it's the fear of loss. Why do you think sales people use the cost of inaction to drive enterprise sales? Like, what happens if you don't use this product? Here are your potential losses and whatnot. Because our brain is primed to pay more attention to avoiding loss than actually gaining an advantage. In change management, you will find this all the time. And people will not resist a change actively, explicitly. Some do. That can be annoying, that can be irritating, and you probably spend a lot of time with them. But most of the time, they resist change passively. They will say, yes, absolutely great idea. The moment you leave the room, nothing gets done. Things are getting slow walked. Things are getting needing more meetings. There needs to be more scope. Like something is not there yet. And so everything just gets slowed down to a point where basically nothing really moves. That's a very elegant, non-confrontational way to resist change. But you also have to keep in mind, change is the method. Change is the mode for the company to architect its next level. The next level that it needs to achieve in order to get to a certain outcome. Whether that's an acquisition, whether that is avoiding bankruptcy, whether that is an IPO, whether that is just running a better company, maybe with less headcount because new technologies came in. And that actually leads also to something that a lot of companies are facing right now. An overwhelming majority of companies experience their AI projects, their artificial intelligence projects, to literally go nowhere. And one of the big reasons for this is that employees often resisted those changes, that these implementations were not followed through with the right rigor and with the right determination, because people were fearing for their jobs. People were fearing, if I'm a head of marketing and I now implement AI tools that do all of my work within a fraction of time, I have to let go probably of 50 employees in my team who have done the same job before. If I'm a sales manager implementing a voice agent that does all the sales calls, like what do I do with my 200 employees, with my 15 team leaders? Like, that's uncomfortable. There are human emotions involved that push back on certain changes. But let's keep in mind, change can be also very rewarding if you come out on the other side. But it's almost like an endurance sport. It's like a mountain hike. There is pain involved in order to get there. And one of the pains where you typically start with change management is, what is actually really going on as a status quo? Because if you skip the step, if you just rush to solutions, first of all, you're not emotionally engaging the people who need to be part of the change. But also you might implement something like some pre-existing framework, some white paper, some big four consulting group model that they came up with. You try to implement this on a living organism, on an ecosystem, which is a commercial organization. And it will be rejected because it doesn't fit there. It doesn't account for all the nuances. It does not account for the unique specifics of this company. And so there's no way to lose credibility faster. And if you lose credibility as a change agent, you're also losing leverage. If people are not on board with your change, if they don't take you serious, if they see what you're doing as more optics, theater, than actually serious work because you didn't even take time to understand their context, it makes it even easier for them to justify their resistance. Now, let's keep in mind, there are also people who embrace change and who push forward. Typically those who do not really benefit from the status quo. They have the strongest motivation to break out of it and move into the next level. Companies often face this when they face financial issues, or when they receive a lot of market pressure or pressure by competitors. Suddenly change can happen very fast. And often those pressures, those, let's call it crises, some of them on a small scale, others on a larger scale, they also really reveal what matters. And they drive focus. They act as a forcing function. They drive focus in a manner that many other situations could not. And so you also will find people who are completely on board with change. Let's not forget that. And they will be your champions in driving any change. Change also cannot be disconnected from actual outcomes. You don't want to drive change for the sake of change. Sometimes it happens in companies too. Change is an operating system. It is a way of how a company operates. That's clear, especially in the times that we're now entering with the global economy adjusting to new realities, new technologies. But ultimately, any change that you are driving, as I said before, needs to start with the ground truth of the organization, with the context. If you skip that step, you will not get the buy-in that you need. And so what does that mean? If we look at the status quo of an organization, it's easy to get trapped into the level of symptoms. For example, the sales organization is not performing how it's supposed to be performing. So the first thing we might look into is, how can we push them to make more calls? How can we improve their pitch? How can we train them on better methodologies and how to have conversations with clients? Seems pretty straightforward. But the reality is often those are just surface solutions. And the root causes are actually often way deeper than that. Of course, if you have a product-led sales motion or a marketing-led sales motion, so it depends on your business model, then you probably look for symptom solutions or symptom treatment on those departments. Now, if you want to take it a step deeper, you will see ultimately that the sales performance problems you have are connected to what is happening in marketing, are connected to what is happening in product, are connected to your market positioning, your external environment, including what competitors are doing. And you need to take a 360 degrees overview over all of those things, because otherwise any change that you're driving, any solutions that you're implementing, will ultimately just meet the cynicism and the disappointment of the people in the company to say, okay, another change that didn't bring anything. If you look into the root causes, which again is a key piece to effective change management, you want to deal with root causes. You want to collapse clusters that actually are responsible for many other problems that are taking place in the company. You first need to take time to actually look at the different layers in the organization. And that starts with the psychological layer. The psychology, the worldview, and the beliefs of the founders, of department heads. What is the underlying philosophy? Like, why does this company even exist? Is it here to make money? Or is it here to serve customers? Is it here to become a unicorn? Is it here to get acquired within a 3-year span? What is the end game? What is the strategic intent? Some companies don't even have that figured out. They just go for the next milestone, the next funding round, and then we will see. We will see where it goes. And so if that is not clear, or at least you knowing that it is not clear, it will help you to have a way more precise idea of where the leverage points are, what you can do and what the organization might not be ready for. Then you go into the operational layers. What are the department heads like? If you're mid-market or growth stage company, you're typically dealing with departments. In smaller companies, it can be individual contributors. It can be sometimes even completely technology-run functions. But if you're dealing with department heads, or if you're dealing with functions with areas of responsibilities, you want to understand who are the people running those. What are their worldviews and beliefs? How do they understand their craft? How does the sales leader look at sales? How does the customer success leader understand their own role? Are they reactive customer service, or are they proactive revenue generating function? Do they want to be the latter, but they can't because they're restrained by all the upstream problems that sales is getting them by bringing in unqualified customers? So you want to start really with the worldview and beliefs of those people, the product team. Do they feel they're just developing internal tools, or do they feel they have a say in the commercial direction of the company? Where does pricing sit? They can tell you a lot about a company. Is pricing decided by the finance team? Is the sales team themselves determining the pricing? Is it in the product team, which also takes place? Can make a lot of sense, right? So wherever pricing sits already tells me a lot. And so I want to look at each department and actually understand the landscape I'm operating in when I'm driving change. And you will find most change, especially when we talk about transformation of structures and organizations, it cannot happen just on a siloed department level. It has to be a complete overhaul. And some departments, some functions will be more impacted and affected by it than others. But ultimately, it needs to be treated as an entire organism and not as individual silos. And we get to this in a moment. There's also a lot to think about in terms of incentive structures, right? Like, because incentive structures drive behaviors also of certain departments, and it determines if they are in conflict with each other, if they're actually working against each other, or if they're working towards a shared goal. The default commission model, for example, is a setup for failure, where marketing teams get incentivized for lead volume, sales get incentivized for revenue volume, and customer success and account managers are left to holding the bag. That typically is not a winning formula, right? And so you also need to see it how an incentive structure. This is what you look at the operational level. And this will also give you insights into who is going to resist any change because their own economic benefit is at stake. We take it then a step further. Once you look into the departments, of course, there are many different layers to look at, and we go into the quantitative level. That means the numbers, the data. Now, some companies overemphasize data in the sense of they have been running on gut feeling in their early stages. At some point, they realized this was not enough. This was a failing recipe, and they said, we're going to change that. And then they overcompensate into the other direction, very proudly striving for data-driven decisions, whereas, of course, data-driven decisions don't really exist. There's always a human who's ultimately responsible for that decision, if not at last the owner of the company who's legally responsible. But you definitely have the problem here that the overemphasis on data creates the idea that data dashboards, reports show us the entirety of reality and that they are more reliable than any qualitative input, which includes the psychology of people, the incentives, the processes, the workflows. Data only shows us one level, one layer, one vantage point of reality, and we need to treat it like this. It's not the absolute reality. It gives us insights, and sometimes, unfortunately, data is not 100% accurate either. This has many reasons. Data can become very political. If you have been running a decentralized organization for a while with multiple markets, multiple departments, multiple geographies, and now you actually want to understand what's going on, retroactively fix your data infrastructure, and actually have real-time central dashboards about what's going on, you will face resistance. And again, not necessarily always the explicit kind of resistance where people tell you off, but passive resistance, like, oh, we don't have that. Oh, I have to look for that. Oh, this type of data, let's see how we get this. And people slow walk you. And why would they do this? Because also they have become familiar with the status quo. They benefit from it. And any change here, any straightening out, again, threatens the way things are. And it only works if you get those people on board fully with you. And sometimes it includes building strong personal relationships as well to lower the fears. A lot of AI implementation projects, and I've seen the same dynamic. Whereas if you don't address the fears of change, if you don't address those fears proactively, employees will always just slow walk and resist those changes, and will make sure that they're not successful at the end. So once you look at data and you also understand resistance here is driven by fear, it's not driven by malintent. Of course, in some cases it is malintent. In some cases, the data transparency would actually expose malpractices and would expose how certain decentralized functions are taking advantage or basically abusing the system, of course, they have a very strong incentive to hide things. But you have to ask yourself, what kind of company do you ultimately want to run? It is my firm belief that only structural truth should be the North Star of all decisions, which means if you do not know what's happening really in that market, in that geography, in that function, because you don't have central visibility, you will just end up always making wrong decisions, or at least decisions that will not bring you the desired outcomes. It's only by understanding context that you can make good decisions. And so once you get through the data and the quantitative layer, now you look into the layer of the external environment, your competitors, regulations, government. It could be that your biggest business risk right now is not your sales team underperforming, but actually a new regulation that is around the corner for which you are not prepared. A lot of companies face that, where overnight their business model was being made obsolete because it could not operate in a certain country or city anymore because the rules just changed overnight. Are you actually staying on top of those things? Do you know about them? These are all risk factors that you want to be proactive about, in order not to be caught up in a firestorm of reactivity, which will force you to last-minute urgent actions, which sometimes have unpredictable consequences. So once you get the full overview, you will get a sense of where are the leverage points here. If I make a certain change, what is likely going to be the reaction by that function, geography, by that market? What is likely going to be the reaction across departments? What do I need to fix as well in order to make this change work? I give you an example about something I'm brought in often in companies to fix is the revenue organization. Often conversations with clients start about, hey, Chris, can you help us improve our sales performance? And once I start working with the company, we actually look into, okay, how is the sales performance connected to different departments and the external environment? And often those interventions turn into a full-blown overhaul of the entire commercial engine. And that includes marketing, customer success, finance, product, and so forth. And the reason for this is, to the example, if I want to solve a problem in sales and I don't understand what is happening in other departments, I will only treat symptoms that don't have real outcomes. If I understand that the problems of sales performance start with my positioning on the market, what the company is known for, is it even known for the product or service that is being offered? Second, does it even speak to the people that would be potential customers? Is the messaging clear? Do we understand the world of those potential customers? Do we understand their fears, their aspirations? Do we understand how they make buying decisions? Do we even care? Have we ever looked into this at all? Because this determines what type of messaging goes out through marketing and also in general through the publicity of the company. What type of sponsors to accept, what type of events to go to, where to be represented, in which industry or even in some cases. And so once you understand your customer profile, you understand that maybe you have a gap there. That needs to be fixed first. Because if upstream, every single lead, every single potential customer who comes in does not even understand what they signed up for and then gets shifted to the sales team, or was contacted and doesn't even understand what it is about, then of course the sales performance downstream will take a hit. Then you look at marketing incentives, for example, and you will see marketing is incentivized to produce thousands of leads each month. Now, they could literally be selling free burgers. They could literally have that messaging and people would sign up. In the end of the day, they will get their bonus for the leads. So the next question becomes, let's change the incentive. Marketing only gets a bonus if these leads turn into SQL, sales qualified leads. If the salesperson says yes after my first call with them or first interaction or based on the customer information, this is a qualified lead. Or you say, I only incentivize my marketing team based on the sales conversion rate. So every single lead that becomes a customer, that's what the marketing team also gets a cut from. Why is that important? You might not think about this. It's not obvious. But now this forces a conversation between marketing and sales, because marketing leaders now, in order to get their own bonus, they need to talk to sales. They need to get feedback. Hey, did the people that we sent you understand what the product is about? How can we sharpen our messaging? And now forces naturally conversations that didn't take place before. As long as marketing was only incentivized to create massive volumes of leads, they had every incentive in the world to dodge any discussions with sales. They had any incentive in the world to hide what they were doing and to not show any of the messaging because they knew it would cause backlash. They knew that nobody would be happy with it. They knew that what they were doing was not proper. And so it starts here. The sales performance starts upstream. The next topic is product. Am I actually selling something that solves problems or adds value? And now, often it happens that product teams really live in a bubble where they don't look beyond into the market. So they think it's a great product. It's amazing. We put in so many hours. You have a bit of sunk cost fallacy in there. We put in a lot of hours, so it must be good. It can be a technically brilliant product. But does it really solve the problems for your customers in the market? If you're a tech company, if you're working in a certain industry, is it really adding value, or is it just a cool gadget? And that question becomes important because if your product is not convincing your potential customers that it is A, better, solving their problems better, adding more value, B, more affordable than competitors, or C, for other reasons that they would want to choose your company over the competitors, for example, customer service, after sales care, whatever it is. If that is not clear, then sales can rip their teeth out. Like they will not perform at the level required. Sales is not just about persuasion and pressuring people into buying. Sales is about connecting the situation of the customer to the actual product and service that you're selling. And product and marketing and any other function needs to be on board with this and needs to have the same mentality. So you look at product, and again, some companies have pricing sitting with the product team. And the reason is that you want the product team to be commercially minded. You want them to constantly scan the market. So the competitor analysis doesn't take place anymore in the marketing team, but it actually takes place in the product team by technical people who sometimes even go on sales calls to understand the customers better and create more customer value, to stay on top of the game in the industry. And that will do more for your sales performance than any sales training could ever do. And now you bring it back to the sales team, and you also need to look at, if you want to be responsible about it, whatever's happening here across marketing, sales, and product. Do I even have margins from this? And in terms of, this is where you include finance. Do I even have a good cross margin, contribution margin? What is my cost of customer acquisition compared to the lifetime value, compared to the financial value that I'm getting out of each customer? Am I operating at a loss? If so, there's a lot of other things that I need to adjust that go way beyond just sales performance, because just increasing the sales performance is not going to solve problems about profitability or about the long-term survivability of the company. And then you also look at customer success, because whenever you acquire any lead or any new customer, you have costs for marketing, you have costs for sales. It costs you money to get this revenue. And what you want to do in customer success or account management is you want to have the same customer that you paid for once, you had all these costs to acquire them, and now you want to upsell them and get more revenue from them without having to spend more marketing and sales costs. It's actually more efficient, cost-efficient revenue for you to treat your existing customers really well, to retain them, to renew them if you have a subscription model, and to upsell and cross-sell them, even sell them other products within your product portfolio. If you don't have other products in your product portfolio, maybe now it's time to think about this. If you don't have a subscription model, maybe it's time to experiment with this. Maybe the product team can pioneer this and experiment it, looking at industry best practices and consumer sentiment. And so you see, the sales performance is part of a bigger story. And sometimes you only look at those symptoms and say, we need to change sales because the performance is not where it is. But you cannot solve these problems in isolation. You need to look at the whole picture. And once you do this, change management becomes a very different league. Change management now becomes a shared mission for the company. Everybody understands how they contribute to that overall mission, how the company needs to achieve its next level. How sometimes worldviews and beliefs get upgraded. Suddenly the product team is involved with all kinds of commercial topics, something they always felt allergic to. Now they developed a new passion for it. I've seen this in real time. Suddenly seeing the same product people I worked with 6 months earlier, now 6 months later, driving the conversations around revenue, around pricing, which is incredible. But it cannot happen if You just come in a change management intervention and impose external frameworks. Like there are always certain rules that you can implement. Like we talked about incentives, you talked about interlinkages between departments. There's certain best practices, certainly. But ultimately, each company, each organization is unique. And any change management intervention needs to start with the context of the organization, on the landscape of psychology, strategy, operations, the quantitative, the metrics, and the external environment. If you skip that part, your change management interventions will never be successful.